The Book of Spirits. With this book, on April 18, 1857, the Spiritist Era dawned on the world. In him, the evangelical promise of the Comforter, the Paraclete or Spirit of Truth, was fulfilled. Saying this is equivalent to stating that the Spirit's book is the code for a new phase of human evolution. And that is exactly its position in the history of thought. This is not an ordinary book, which you can read from one day to the next and then forget about it in the corner of the shelf. Our duty is to study and meditate on it, reading and rereading it constantly. A whole building rises above this book, that of the Spiritist Doctrine. It is the cornerstone of Spiritism, its starting point. Spiritism emerged with him and spread with him imposed himself and consolidated itself in the world. Before this book, there was no Spiritism, and not even that word existed. There was talk of spiritualism and Neo-Spiritualism in a general, vague, and nebulous way. Spiritist facts, which always existed, were interpreted in the most diverse ways. But, after Kardec released it to publicity, containing the principles of the Spiritist Doctrine, a new light shone on the world's mental horizons. There is a historical sequence that we cannot forget when taking this book in our hands. When the world was preparing to emerge from the chaos of primitive civilizations, Moses appeared as the leader of a people destined to draw the lines of a new world, and, from his hands, the Bible emerged. It was not Moses who wrote it, but he was the central reason for this first codification of the new cycle of revelations, the Christian. Later, when biblical influence had already shaped a people, and when these people were already dispersed throughout the Gentile world, spreading the new law, Jesus appeared, and from his words, collected by the disciples, the gospel emerged. The Bible is the codification of the first Christian revelation, the Hebrew code in which the sacred principles and the great religious legends of ancient peoples were merged. The great synthesis of the efforts of antiquity towards the Spirit. The gospel is the codification of the second Christian revelation, the one that shines at the center of the triad of these revelations, having in the figure of Christ the Son that illuminates the two others, that sheds his light on the past and the future, establishing the connection between the two. Necessary. But just as the gospel was already announced in the Bible, the prediction of a new code also appeared in it, that of the Spirit of Truth, as seen in John 14. And the new code emerged at the hands of Allan Kardec, under the guidance of the Spirit of Truth, at the exact moment when the world was preparing to enter a higher phase of its development. Hegel, in his aesthetic lessons, shows us the monstrous creations of Eastern art, gigantic figures, with two heads and many arms and legs, as well as other diverse forms as the first attempt by beauty to dominate matter and be able to express yourself through it. Gross matter resists the force of the ideal, disfiguring it in its representations. But it ends up being dominated, and then the balanced and harmonious forms of classical art appear in the world. However, having reached the maximum possible balance, beauty itself breaks this balance, and the romantic and modern forms of art, seeking to overcome its material instrument, to better and more freely express itself. This grandiose Hegelian theory seems perfectly applicable to the process of Christian revelations. From the incongruous and terrifying forms of ancient times, we move to the classical balance of the gospel and, from there, to the spiritual liberation of the Spirit's book. Each phase of human evolution ends with a conceptual synthesis of all its achievements. The Bible is the synthesis of antiquity, as the gospel is the synthesis of the Greco-Roman Jewish world, and the Spirit's book, that of the modern world. But each synthesis does not only contain the results of the evolution carried out, because it also contains the seeds of the future. And in the evangelical synthesis, we must consider, above all, the presence of the Messiah, as a direct intervention from above for the reorientation of earthly thought. It is thanks to this intervention that evangelical principles pass directly, without the need for readaptations or modifications, in their primitive purity, to the pages of this book, as the main beams of the construction of the new age. Comments inspired by the words of José Herculano Pires in The Book of Spirits, Introduction, Editor Lake. The study of Allan Kardec's work is fundamental for the correct knowledge of the Spiritist doctrine.